Hey, so today's Daf Yomi is sponsored by Duvin Tehillah Catcher for the month, B'schus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra, and today is Monday, right?
Yep.
I didn't forget what we're up to. Right? Today's Monday because we had the Moav Malka, so it threw me off, right? So Monday's Daf is anonymously sponsored for Hatzlacha and learning for all of their anonymous grandchildren. So we'll have Hatzlacha. Okay, we are at the top of Lamed Amud Beis, 4 lines down, Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim. So we were discussing 2 parts of this issue of witnesses. Do the witnesses have to witness the event together? That was issue number 1. And then do the witnesses have to testify together? If they don't, seems that this issue of not being, Rabbi Nassan was talking about whether you had to testify together. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha was having this argument about whether they actually had to witness the same event together. If you don't, testifying together seemed to be less required than witnessing the same event together, because testifying, as we said, even if you were testifying together, you're not really testifying simultaneously. One person and then the other person is testifying. So the issue of whether you had to witness the same event or be present together witnessing that one event, that was one issue. And then the other issue is about testifying.
So they can come at different times?
So that was what we had discussed, right? That we even had the case where one witness came one day and the other witness came the next day, right? And we would be able to accept their testimony as 2 witnesses, according to Rabbi Nassan.
About something happening in between?
That they shared their testimony to each other. Here's what they asked me. Let me tell you. Yeah. According to that opinion, we don't. But that's a good point. Yes.
Well, why is that word last two ate him a lot after in 2 different days?
Well, what you're asking why they're allowed to do that, right? So that is Rabbi Nassan's position, because he says that witnesses can't possibly be testifying simultaneously. So therefore, what difference does it make whether it's an hour separation or a day separation? Okay, Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, hava mishtakid alei Rabbi Yossi berbi Chanina mismechei. So the story was that Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim was trying his best to get Rabbi Yossi berbi Chanina to get smicha. He was pushing it. Velo kamistayeya milsa, and he wasn't able to be successful on that point. Yom echad, one day, hava Yosef kamid Rabbi Yochanan, he was sitting before Rabbi Yochanan, Amar lahu, and he said to the students, Mi ika diyada halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Korcha o lo. Does anybody know if the halacha is like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha in this issue about needing to witness the event together or not? So Amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim. So Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim said to him, Dain yada. So he says, this guy knows. So he says, Amar le lema. So he says, okay, well, let's have him tell us what's the answer. So he says, lema ezo. So he says, Amar le lismechemar bereisha. So he says, well, before you ask him, can you do us a favor and give him smicha? That was how he eventually got him to get smicha. So Rabbi Yochanan did. He gave him smicha. That's how Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha got smicha. Clearly he knew him. Yeah, it was clear that that he knew him. He was in the shiur, in the base medrash. Amar le b'ni, amor li ketzad shamas. He says, okay, now tell me what you heard. So Amar le kach shamati. This is what I heard. Shemod Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha Rabbi Nassan. So he says, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha agrees with Rabbi Nassan that the testimony can be done at different times, that they don't have to testify simultaneously. So he says, so that so Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha will agree with Rabbi Nassan. We know the halacha is like Rabbi Nassan, so therefore that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha in that circumstance about the testimony. Amar, he said, Lezeh hitzrachti. So he says, I needed you for that. That I could have figured out anyway. He says, look, if Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha doesn't even need them to witness the same event together, so then Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha lo banin, we don't need it. Haggadah mibai, of course, he agrees with Rabbi Nassan that you don't have to testify simultaneously. The 2 witnesses are already separated by what they witnessed. Clearly, they don't have to testify simultaneously. So I wouldn't have needed you to tell me that the halakha is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha because he agrees with Rabbi Nassan. I was asking about whether the halakha is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha about the fact that you don't have to witness the same event in the first place, or the event simultaneously together. Samar le, ho valis lo terein. He says, but since I've already given you smicha, I won't take it back. just leave this micha in place, right? Obviously, he was deserving anyway. Amar Reb Zera says, Shma mina, we learn from here that Ga'ava Rabba came into samich, that once a great person gets smicha, they don't lose their smicha. Right? You can say like, oh no, he's not keeping up, he's not studying enough, we're going to take a smicha away. You never take a smicha away. That's correct. No recertification.
Nice.
Amar Rechia bar Abin says, Amar Rav, halach Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. The halacha is in fact like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, again, that the two witnesses do not need to witness the same event simultaneously. Bein bekarkos, bein bemetalton, he says, and it does not matter whether we're talking about land or we're talking about movable items. Now here's why, we'll see in a second. Ula says, halach Rabbi Shua ben Karcha ben karkos. The halach is Rabbi Shua ben Karcha when it comes to land, aval lo bemetalton, but not movable objects. Why? Because if person number one testifies that you owe, let's say that this land belongs to so-and-so, and then another witness, unrelated, doesn't know how the other person knows that, but he also knows that this land belongs to him, at least you can say they're both testifying about the same thing, this piece of land. Each witness is testifying. This witness is testifying that this one owns it, that this one is also testifying the same thing. When it comes to movable objects, if this person says that you owe him, that cup belongs to him, the Kahal Yereim mug that you have belongs to him, and then another guy says the Kahal Yereim mug belongs to him, it doesn't have to be the same Kahal Yereim mug. So therefore, how do you know that they're giving it all? But the fact is that the two of them together, so that's what according to the first opinion is that even Rabbi Shua ben Karcha agrees, the halachos like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha in that case also, because what they're both agreeing to is that you owe a Kahal Yereim mug, right? It does not make a difference if it's the same mug that they're testifying about. They are both agreeing to the fact that there is a Kahal Yereim mug that is owed. But according to Ula, he says, no, not when it comes to movable objects, because they're testifying about two different things. This one could be testifying, he could be one witness about this mug, and this one could be one witness about a completely different mug. You can't combine those two things together. Amalei Abaye says, halacha miklal dipligi. Well, when you say the halacha is like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha about land or not, they all agree the halacha is like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha when it comes to land. But that means that somebody must be arguing with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, because you wouldn't say the halacha is like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha unless somebody was arguing with him. Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Huna, didn't Rav Abba say in Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Mordechai Chacham Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha be'edus karka, that even the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha when it comes to land, right? So there's nobody arguing with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha on that point. So what do you mean that they argue and the halacha is like him? But Tani Rav Idi bar Abin, Rav Idi bar Abin explains, Benezikin debe karna modin Chachamim l'Rabbi Shua ben Karcha be'edus bechor ube'edus karka ube'edus chazaka. So he says that the Chachamim are going to agree when it is a case of firstborn animal, because again, then we know we're both testifying. One person is testifying that this animal has a blemish over here. The other person is testifying, no, there's a blemish over here. But there,
you can't use it
as a korban, correct? And that means the Kohen can slaughter it. No. You can eat a blemished animal. You can't eat a treif animal, right? But you can eat an animal that has a blemish, right? Just can't use it as a korban. So therefore, if one is testifying about one blemish and one's testifying about another blemish, they both can testify together, even though they're not testifying about the same thing, right? Also, the next case, Eidus Karka which was land, and Be'edus Chazaka when it comes to testimony about what living in a land for 3 years. Let's say this person says this person lived here for years 1, 2, and 3 of the Shemitah year, and the other guy testifies, no, I was his neighbor during years 4, 5, and 6. So now you've got two different people. Now, are they testifying about the same 3 years? No, but testimony they both have in common is they both testified that he was there for 3 years. Therefore, we can combine those two testimonies together. Only
if they're continuous.
The 3 years are continuous.
No, the 6, like you're saying, one is...
All their testimony, they're not telling you if my years are continuous with your years. I'm just testifying that he was there for 3 years, and he has a chazaka. The other guy's testifying he was there for 3 years, and they had a chazaka.
Different.
But how about
different 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I was going to say, because there could be a gap in the middle, but it doesn't matter because he has chazaka either way, because it's 3 years.
Exactly, yep.
Right, but you only have one aid in each...
That's the point.
Right.
Each witness...
right.
But we're saying that the witness is not testifying about the fact that he lived in this land for years 1, 2, and 3. And I need two witnesses to prove that he lived here 1, 2, 3. No. The testimony is that he has a chazaka.
You could combine two different chazakas, two different times.
There you are. That's Rabbi Shua ben Karcha's point. That's Rabbi Shua ben Karcha.
Right, because you can move out, move
Same
back.
thing. We had a blemish by this animal. This animal's blemish, but that was like he says, the ear was clipped off, and this guy says, well, but there was a nick on one of the legs. Okay, but those are two different blemishes. You don't have two witnesses on either of the blemishes. The answer is no. But this one's testifying the animal's blemished, and this one is testifying that he's blemished. Right? Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Says Yehuda, I was waiting for you. Says, who's this Rabbi Shua ben Karcha? So it's a machlokas Rashi and Tosfos. Apparently, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, some say, is actually Rabbi Akiva's son, because Rabbi Akiva is called Kireach in one Gemara, and so therefore Shua ben Karcha may be Rabbi Akiva's son, maybe. But Tosfos says absolutely not, cannot be, because Karcha sounds like a nickname,
By force.
which means baldy.
It means what?
Baldy. Yeah.
When you see a balkur, like by force.
That's with a cuff. That's with a cuff. This is with a kuff. Right? This is about this is karcha. This is the bald one. And they wouldn't say, nobody would like refer to Rabbi Akiva as the bald, right? Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So you see that's for Tosfos doesn't like it. Right. So there. So they. So
In the case of a movable object,
yes.
it's not the same because it could be more like different.
So we're going to discuss that in greater detail again.
But what if it's a distinctive?
So then it would potentially it falls into the same category as land, right? If I
Even
can
if
test.
it's
But
movable.
land could be different times of ownership. Man could buy a land, sell a land.
Yeah, no, we were
land.
saying like two witnesses testified the fact that I saw him buy this land, right? One person says I saw you buy it on Tuesday. One guy says I saw you buy it on Wednesday. Then it would be the same piece of land, right?
Right, so I mean, there's got to be consecutiveness to it. Because if you...
No, this is
if
where he
it's
actually
10
saw
years,
that he bought it. This is not a testimony for chazaka. We had before a case of testifying on the land itself. Okay, we'll get into greater detail here. So, v'chein shebabein v'shebas. Also, if you're testifying about the physical maturity of a son or a daughter to be able to see if they are old enough to be able to do certain mitzvos or transactions. So, Gavra Karamis, he says, well, what's your point? This is you're trying to prove that even when it comes to these other movable items that the halachas of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, that's a different amora. So they have an argument about what Rabbi Shua ben Karcha holds. Mar savar pligi or mar savar lo pligi. One says that there was no argument, that everyone, even the chachamim, agreed with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha when it came to land, that the testimony doesn't have to be at the same time, and others said that Chum disagreed with Rabbi Shua ben Karcha and said that it had to be. Okay, so my v'chein shebebein v'shebebas. What is the case? Let's focus on this one case here, where we're testifying about the physical maturity of a son or a daughter. So what are the witnesses testifying to? Let's say the issue is that you have to testify to whether they have two pubic hairs. So now, what are they testifying? If one's testifying that I saw one hair here, and one says I saw one hair over here, right? And I saw one doctor that was looking at was looking at one part of his body, one doctor looking at another one. So then one doctor said I saw one hair here, one says another hair here.
So about his maturity.
That's to testify about his maturity. So now the problem with that testimony is hai chatzi davar v'chatzi edoshu. That means that each one is only testifying to half of the testimony. Because think about what they're testifying about. They're not testifying. Neither one of them is testifying. What is the key that they're testifying about? They're testifying that this boy is mature enough to be considered an adult for mitzvos. Well, neither one of them is testifying that. Each one of them is testifying I saw only one hair. So neither of them is testifying to the key. It's not like the same thing as we said when two people one person was testifying about this mum on the animal and this one was testifying about this mum on the animal. Because each one was testifying that the animal had a mum. So he's testifying, it's not the same mum, but this one was, so he says, so that is not the case. Ella, rather what's going on here is echad omer shtaim begavav, echad omer shtaim bekreisa. What's going on here is this one testified that she had two hairs on her back and one says two hairs on her front. Each one is testifying that the child is mature, right? So therefore, they're just not both testifying about the same indicator. And that is okay. That's okay. That's consistent with the other examples that we gave. Amar of Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Ana amina mishmei de Ula, I say in the name of Ula, that halacha Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, bein bekarkos, bein bemetaltalman. It doesn't matter whether we are talking about land or movable objects. V'Rabbanan de asu mimechoza amri, and the Rabbanan that came from Mechoza, they said, Amar Rabbi Zera, in the name of Rabbi Zera, mishmei de Rav, bekarkos in avalo bemetaltal. When it comes to land, yes, because then we can at least know it's the same item, and when it comes to movable objects, not so. Rav Latame, Rav is going according to his own reasoning. Damar Rav. Rav says, Hoda achar hoda, hoda achar halva mitzdarfi. Let's say one witness, this guy comes and he admits to the loan, and then he admits to guy number 2 that he owes him the money, right? So now he admits it twice. Once to this one guy, once to this one guy. Or, right, one guy saw him borrow the money, and then he came to one guy and said, I admit it. So now those 2 witnesses will combine, right? Why? What's the logic here? The reason why is because they're both testifying about the same loan, right? One person, he comes and says, I'm telling you about the loan, and then I'm telling you about the loan. Both ways we're telling it's the same loan, right? Or I saw the loan, and now I told you about the loan. It's the same loan. Halva achar halva, halva achar hoda. But what happens if you have one guy, he says, I saw you borrow 100, and then another guy says, I saw you borrow 100. Well, it's not the same loan. So now can you testify about that? This is what we said was the problem with metalton, with the movable objects. The testimony may still be consistent that he says that he owes him $100, but that's only good according to Ula. According to Rav, no, it has to be the same loan. So if one guy witnessed a borrowing of 100, and then guy number 2 witnessed borrowing of 100, they didn't witness the same event. There's no 2 witnesses to prove that he owes him the $100. Same thing if he comes and tells one guy, I owe him $100, and then the second guy says afterwards, I witnessed him borrow $100. Well, you can't have witnessed what he already told him yesterday he owed. That's 2 different loans. So therefore, that's not going to work, right?
Would that make you non-kosher aid for that situation?
That would make the pair non-acceptable. Correct. The witness is fine, but he's one guy, right? He's not going to be able to do anything. So those lo mitzdarfi, those are not going to combine together. So Ashkechei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rav Huna brei Rav Yoshua. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak saw Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua. Amar le, Maishna halva achar halva delo. Explain this to me, he says. Why is it that if 2 witnesses, Ruvain and Shimon, Ruvain says, I saw the loan on Monday, and then Shimon says, I saw the loan on Tuesday. Why can't we combine those 2 testimonies together and say, according to Rav, and say that he owes $100? The answer is, because we know for sure that the $100 loan that you saw on Monday was not the same loan that took place on Tuesday.
Right.
So you're not 2 witnesses on the same event. So he says, well, one second then. If that's the case, so then hoda achar hoda nami. So then why would we accept if Ruvain says that the guy came over to me and admitted that he owes him $100 on Monday, and then he goes to the other guy and he says, Shimon says he admitted to me that he owes him $100 on Tuesday. Well, how do you know that's the same loan? Right? I mean, it could be, but it might not be. Could be that he is admitting to 2 different loans.
Right.
So amana de kamodi kami hi lo modi kami hi. The guy, the $100 that he's admitting in front of this guy is not the same $100 that he's admitting in front of this guy. Damar le lahai basra the high mana de oduye le kamach oduye le nami kami ploni. The answer is, yeah, we have to add a little bit more to the story. The story is that when he came to the second guy, he said, oh, and by the way, this is the same loan I told Reuven about yesterday. By adding that in, now we know it is the same loan. That's why the 2 testimonies can combine together.
The truth is that could happen even in the same moment. If he says to one guy...
No, if your 2 guys are witnessing one admission...
One admission, but he's saying...
Correct. It doesn't have to be 2 days later, right? It could go to this guy and say, I owe 100, and then turn around to you and go, I owe 100, right? So that could be 2 different loans. Correct. Yeah. That could be. So therefore, the answer is, he had to go to person number 2 and say, this is the same loan I'm telling person number 1 about. So he says, but still, akatzi, basra yoda kama lo yoda. Still, the first witness, the second one is fine. He knows. He knows that it's the same. How does the first witness know it's the same loan that the second guy knows about? When he was told about it, he didn't know that who he was going to tell the second part of this testimony to. So the answer is, dehadar azil. He says, you're right. He has to go back and tell the first guy, by the way, I just want you to know, I just told him about it too. So he goes and tells Reuven the case. Then he tells Shimon, I told Reuven about it, and I'm telling you the same thing. Then he goes back to Reuven and he says, by the way, the thing I told you about yesterday, I told Shimon too. So now you're both witnesses. Congratulations, you're a pair. That's what has to happen. So Amar Le, so he goes back. He says, the Hadar Azol, Amar Le Lakami, goes back to the first guy, and he says, Hi money del le kamach, that 100, remember the 100 that I admitted to you? Oduye le nami kami ploni, I went and I also admitted it in front of the other guy. Okay, so Amar Le, so Rav Huna it was Rav Nach, no, Rav Huna, this is Rav Huna, says back, Tanuach datech shehisnachta es dati, he says, thank you so much. What a brilliant answer. You've explained how we know that it's the same loan. And I feel happy about that. So Amar Le, not to leave good enough alone, he answers back to Rav Huna, he says, my nichusa, Derava, he says, why are you so happy about that answer? He says, Derava, Vitim Rav Sheshes, because either Rava, some says Rav Sheshes, Shadabe Nargo, they took the answer that I just gave you and they already tore that answer apart. Let me tell you what's wrong with my answer. He says, you asked me the question, I gave you an answer. Now you think it's a great answer. Let me tell you what's wrong with my answer. So he says, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with my answer. Lav hainu hoda achar hava. So he says, if that's the case, right, that the admission means that I went to you and then I told you and then I went back to you and I told you and I went back and forth like this. So then what is the case where the one person saw the loan and the other person saw an admission? Well, how would that case be? That means that first I witnessed, right, Reuven witnessed the loan, and then you come along and tell Shimon, by the way, there was a loan yesterday. Oh, but now I've got to also add in, remember, Reuven is the one who saw the loan, so you're going to combine witnesses with him. But then I got to go back to Reuven and say, by the way, I told Shimon, right? But then when he's going back to Reuven and he's telling about Shimon, then Shimon's testimony is valid, not because he saw the loan, but because he came back to him later and admitted the loan and told him about Reuven. So then,
I'm struggling to understand how this is not considered an Echad in each case.
you're still stuck with that. That's the whole point of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha.
I know, but it's because it's not. It's completely different testimony. It's like remove one, and you wouldn't believe me. A second testimony that's separate about a different loan.
Yeah.
Now I believe both.
Because I'm
How does that
testifying
work?
the same thing is because I'm testifying that the same thing is true. Now, again, we have two ways of looking at this, okay? And we have to be able to make the clear distinction because we're going back and forth on these. Are we suggesting that you can have two people witness and we have to know that the thing that they witnessed was really the same thing? That was Rav's point of view. They can each witness it separately, but they have to know that they're talking about the same thing. Or does it not matter at the end of the day, if this guy says you owe 100 and that guy says you owe 100, the one thing that they agree to is
that they owe 100.
They owe 100.
Right.
That does not seem
that's
to be what
one-
we're going with
but
right
when
now.
you were combining before, when you were saying you could say 200 because
No, not 200. No, that we never said. Right? If one guy says you owe 100, one guy says you owe 100, there's no two witnesses that say you owe 200.
it's just that we all agree that for sure. there's
100, that's correct. Okay?
Okay.
So this witnessing the loan and then getting an admission afterwards, the exact same case as somebody who admitted that he admitted two guys. Samar Le, Hainu deshmiya li alaychu deramisu dikli v'zakfisu lehu. So he says, that's what people used to say about you. They're always saying that you cut down trees and then you replant them, meaning you solved my problem and then you put it right back in place. You gave me a great answer and now you chopped it down. So thank you, but no thank you, right? So, okay, so now, Nardai Amri, Bein Hoda Achar Hoda, Bein Hoda Achar Halva, Bein Halva Achar Halva, Bein Halva Achar Hoda, Mitztarfos. It does not matter whether one person saw the loan, one person heard about the loan after, and the fact, or the other way around. None of that matters. Why? Because ultimately, two of you are testifying about the fact that you owe 100. It's irrelevant if you're testifying about the same loan anymore. As long as you're testifying, he comes and tells you that I owe 100 today, and then the other witness witnesses him borrow tomorrow, that's going to combine together because they both agree that they owe 100. That's how Nardai says, okay? Come on, so who's that like? That's like Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Okay, so that's good. We're back to Rabbi Shua ben, full circle, right? Back to Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. That's what he says. Amar Rav Yehuda. Okay, Rav Yehuda says, Eidus ha-mekcheshes zu azu bebedikos kshera bedini mamnus. If I get testimony that the that there's contradictions in the bedika parts. There's two parts to when the judges question the witnesses. There are bedikos and there are chakiros. A chakira is the main questions that you need to ask in order to make this a testimony that Edom Zomim could come and knock you off. What time did you see it? Where was it? What day was it? Who were, the main key questions. Then you've got bedikos. Bedikos are other ancillary questions we ask in order to be able to see if you know what you're talking about. Says Rav Yehuda that if you get two witnesses and they contradict each other on the bedikos, the testimony can still work together. You can still combine them if you're talking about monetary cases. Okay, now, Amar Rava says, Mistavra Milseid Rav Yehuda. You know what Rav Yehuda says makes sense in certain cases. They're testifying about a loan, and one guy says the guy pulled out his wallet, and it was a black wallet. The other guy says he pulled out his wallet, and it was a white wallet. Right? They says he didn't tell him that. He says he pulled out his wallet and gave him $200. Okay, great. What color was the wallet? One guy says black, one guy says white. Does that matter? He says, doesn't matter. It's not so relevant to the case. But let's say one guy says it was old money, old coins versus new coins. Well, that should make a difference. For example, let's say somebody says, right, he lent him $200. One guy says he gave him two $100 bills, and the other guy says he gave him 10 20s. Well, that makes a bigger difference because the testimony is not about some minor detail unrelated to the loan itself. Here, they're both testifying about two very different things. The loan couldn't have happened both ways. So there's a contradiction here. So then ein mitzarfen, you cannot combine those two witnesses together in that case. So when you say that this is applicable when it comes to financial cases, what are you saying? If the same sort of a circumstance were to happen in a murder case, right, we would not accept the testimony. Like, for example, if Amar Rav Chisda says, Amar Echad Omer B'Sayif Hargo, V'Echad Omer Ba'ariran Hargo. One says that he killed him with a sword, one says with a dagger. Sometimes it was a translation as a spear, whatever. They argue over the murder weapon. So Ein Zeh Nachon. Then that can't be, that's no testimony, you can't combine them together. That's very important to know the murder weapon, right? Echad Omer Kelev Shchorim, Echad Omer Kelev Levanim. One guy says he was wearing black clothes. The other guy was saying he's wearing white clothes. Harei Zeh Nachon. You can combine those testimonies together because that's not so relevant to the main part of the case.
Wait, so we would accept if two people had two different days for $100 loan, and we would accept it. Am I right?
No, days. Days, no.
That wasn't what we're talking about here, but you're saying generally that was what we said before, right? That is correct.
That detail. So, but we said, and we worked it, that we said it doesn't matter, it's 2 different days. What we could agree on, we don't know if it's 2 loans or 1 loan, but what we do agree on is somebody owes $100. So if it's 2 different days and 2 different currencies, why can't we just say that, oh, maybe it's 2 different loans, but for sure it's everything that this person owes $100.
So the difficulty that we're going to have here, the difficulty we're having here is that we know the 2 of them are testifying about the same occurrence.
Right. But we said before, like even when it was 2 different occurrences.
That's different. That we said was okay.
Right, but we accepted 1 witness on each day, and we were good with it.
Because they're both testifying about the fact that there's a $100 loan.
Right.
But here, they're both saying, we were there at the loan at the bank. It was 200. We were there on Tuesday, this afternoon. We were both there. Yeah.
Isn't that the whole basis of Edom Zomim? That if they're
Edom Zomim,
if someone comes and say you were here,
that's correct,
and the other day,
that's correct. But
so how can it be consistent to this? The fact that it's 2 different days.
So you could still contradict a witness and make him a zomim, as even if the 2 witnesses. Remember, we're saying that one witness tells you I witnessed a loan on this day, and another witness comes along and says I witnessed a loan on this day. Right? You could still have Edom Zomim attack this guy and Edom Zomim attack this guy. You just can't attack them both simultaneously. Right? Okay. So now Lamed Aleph, Gavra Karamis. What are you trying to bring me a dispute between two? So they disagree with each other. These are Amoraim. They disagree with each other. So according to the opinion, here's where it comes back to it. Okay, this is Brian. Now where we bring it back in. According to Nardai, they say if one guy says a black, one guy says a white, you can still combine the testimonies together. Why? Come on, who do they like? Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. They hold like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha because Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says you can even be on different days. Doesn't make a difference, right? That's what you're saying, right? So therefore, if Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says different days, why should he care whether it's a black wallet or a white wallet? It could be a different loan.
So my question wasn't so crazy.
No. Your questions are always the next stage in the Gemara. It's never crazy. But this is the answer, right? The answer is Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says that he can accept different testimonies about different loans. He says that's when the witnesses are not contradicting each other, right? They're not arguing. There's no difference. You can accept both testimonies. Yes, he borrowed $100 from you. Yes, he witnessed a loan over here. Both of those are true. Therefore, a $100 loan. Okay, great. But heicha de mekashia adadi. Here, the testimony is actually contradicting because they are claiming to have witnessed the same loan, the same act, and they saw it very differently. Therefore, they both can't be correct. So therefore, mi Amar, how do you know Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha would agree in that case? Ella, hu de Amar ki haitan. Rather, that opinion that says it's okay to have different color wallets and things is according to this opinion. The Tanya we learn in Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, "Lo nechlechu beishamei beis Hillel al shtei kitei edim she'achas omeres masayim v'achas omeres mana sheish b'chal masayim mana." You know, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai don't disagree. Let's say you have two sets of witnesses that come to court. One set of witnesses comes to court and says, "We know that this fellow borrowed $200." Then two witnesses come to court and they say, "We know that this fellow owes $100. Are they contradictory witnesses? No. Why? Because Bichlal Masayim Maneh. Because the guy who holds, when you say 200, at least 100 is included in 200. So that's not a contradiction. Right? Alma nechlaku. What's the argument that they have? Alkas achas. If there's one testimony, one set. Shebei Shammai omerem nechlaka edusan. Beis Shammai says, well, now if you've got one person who comes and says he owes 200, one person says he owes 100, you can't say that's one testimony, right? That's what Beis Shammai says. That does not work. Beis Hillel omerem, because why? Because they're both testifying about the same event, the same occurrence, and so therefore it's clearer that one of these witnesses is mistaken, and so you can't trust them. Beis Hillel say, nope, yesh b'chal masayim mana. You're still going to accept both, because even the witness that says 200 and the witness says 100, they're both agreeing that at least there was a loan for 100.
Right.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit wonky still, right?
200, but
could it get a
say 100,000 to $10 million.
Oh, okay, that's a perfect question. So this is the issue.
It's obvious.
So this is the issue that the Rishonim asked. I was listening to Rabbi Razner's shiur on this point to be able to, because that's a bothersome question, and he answers this issue when he was giving his Daf Yomi Shiur. He said that the Rishonim bring down that the reason why Beis Hillel holds that way is because people can make mistakes. Okay, so I thought the loan was for 200. It was really for 100. So we're going to take the lower of the two because probably we have a method of explaining away how, because we don't want to say they're liars. That's the last thing we want to do. So we'd rather explain somebody made a mistake. So we'll stick with the 100. Rabbi Razner asks your question. He says, what would be if somebody says $10 and the other guy says $1 million? So there seems to be at some point where you can't say people make a mistake. So you're right. The answer is you're right. This case, $100, $200, okay, maybe a guy can make a mistake. If it was something like $100 and $1 million, there's a limit, right? That people would notice the difference.
Even the fact that we only focus on currency, I mean, that's a slippery slope.
Yes.
You could be like, okay, well, it was a black guy with a white wallet. No, it was a white guy with a black wallet, and it was raining, it was sunny, like every detail could be different, but you're telling me, but the currency, that's where we're medayek.
Hang on, we're ahead again. Echad Omer, next case. Brian's case. Echad Omer chavish shel yain ve'echad Omer chavish shel shemen. One guy says he owed him a barrel of wine. One guy says he owes him a barrel of oil, right? So now, it's not money, it's not currency now. So now there's a mistake here, right?
Oil could be more expensive.
That oil is more expensive than wine. But the question is, though, you can't explain that it was the same object, right? At least with currency, you could say within the 200 was 100, but this is no such thing. You can't say a barrel of oil and a barrel of wine are the same thing. So Hava Uvda v'asla kamei de Rabbi. So there was a case like that, and it came before Rabbi Chayve Rabbi Ami l'shlumi lechavisa dechamra. He made the guy pay the barrel of wine. Why? Because migo chavisa demashcha. So he says, because why? Because it's less than the barrel of oil. So you're going to pay whatever's the lesser amount. So okay, so come on. So who does that hold like? It's Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So he's like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So he says, well, wait a second. Amar Damar Reb Shimon ben Elazar heicha diyesh bichla masayimana. That Reb Shimon ben Elazar said that was only when it comes to currency. Right? To people, that was acceptable. Ki hai gavna mi amar. But would he say the same thing about a barrel of wine and a barrel of oil? Those are two completely different objects. It's not the same thing at all. So the answer is lo tzricha. No, I do need it. He says lidmei. What happened was that one person is claiming that he borrowed the value of a barrel of oil, and the other guy says he borrowed a value of a barrel of wine. So it was still currency. It wasn't the actual item, but otherwise you'd be right. That's exactly your point. And yes, you cannot make a mistake between a barrel of oil and a barrel of wine, so therefore...
The truth is that back then, it was most likely the barter system. It wasn't really... People weren't buying with currency back then, right?
Right.
So that's a very common mistake.
I would have...
They're used to bartering things, so
therefore I said, I'll trade you a value of the barrel of wine for this or that, and that kind of thing, yeah. Echad Omer, another case. Echad Omer b'diuta ha'elyona, ve'echad Omer b'diuta ha'tachtona. There was another case where they were witnessing a loan. One said it took place on the second floor, one said it took place on the first floor. Well, so it sounds like it's a contradiction. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Ma'isabel lifnei Rabbi, v'tzir feduson. That sort of case came before Rabbi, and he did combine them together, Rashi says, because that's like Rabbi Shimon Korcha. Essentially, they were both testifying to different loans. One loan happened on the second floor, one loan happened on the first floor. They're agreeing to the fact that a loan occurred, hence he accepted their testimony.
Could it be two separate loans?
That's the point, yes, that's right. Yep.
It's very hard to find detail. What are the relevant details versus the not relevant details?
Well, and
or like where could there be?
When do we with this issue of Rabbi Shimon Korcha? He's telling us that ultimately, if the testimony is two separate loans, that's fine.
Right.
The problem is going to be if I've got contradictory, right? Okay. We had that sort of a situation we have by shtaros. If the shtar has no signatures on it, then I can use the Edi Masira. I can use the witnesses of the handing off of the shtar. But if I actually have improper witnesses on the contract, that will ruin it. Right? That's the same kind of idea. Okay, next. How do I know that when the person leaves court, he's not supposed to say who ruled what? How do you know you're not supposed to say this? You're not supposed to tell somebody, I sided with you, the other guys. It's their fault. What am I supposed to do? They outnumbered me. Talmud Pasuk says, don't be a talebearer in your nation. It says, somebody who is a talebearer and they reveal secrets. That is a bad thing. Degali Milsa, there was a certain student that it came out about him that he revealed something to Itmar Be Midrash Basar Esrin V'Tartin Shnin, something that was said in the base medrash 22 years ago. Now I'm not sure whether he revealed it came out about him that it was revealed that he said something 22 years ago, or I think it sounds like he revealed now something that was said in the base medrash 22 years ago. Right? So this is the question: what's the big deal? So he said something in the base measures. It has to be one of these halachos ve'ein morin kain circumstances, right? One of these circumstances where you say you're not supposed to tell people. This, you can do that, but it's not the right thing to tell people to do. Like, for example, the halacha is that you could. It says in the Torah, "V'yigisa bo yom v'layla," you're supposed to learn Torah day and night, and your yotzei by Kriya Shema. So he said, don't tell the Yamei Haaretz that. Some say, do tell the Yamei Haaretz that. Why don't you tell the Yamei Haaretz? So everybody's got to hope you're a good person too. You say Kriya Shema every morning and night. That's a good thing too. You should keep doing that, right? But don't tell them, because we want them to feel guilty. We want them eventually to say, okay, I got to go learn something. So go show up and learn, right? Otherwise, they're just going to do Kriya Shema and they're not going to learn anything. So don't tell them that. But the halach is like that. So therefore, that's like there are certain situations like that. You don't go tell the secrets of the base medrash. We're not supposed to do that. So Afke Rav Ami Midrasha. Rav Ami threw him out of the base medrash. He got expelled. Amar Dain Gully Razi. He said, this guy is a revealer of secrets. Says the Mishnah, Kosman Shmevi Raya Soser Es Hadin. Anytime somebody brings a proof, then they retry the case. Right? You can knock off the court case based on new testimony that comes forward. We don't have a problem of double jeopardy in Jewish law. If you find new evidence, you bring new evidence, changes the law. Amru lo, if the court, however, said, Kol raya sheyesh chavei mikan vad shoshim, you have 30 days to bring all your proofs, right? Maybe it looks like the guy's delaying or whatever it is. And the basin says, you got 30 days. Matzah b'toch shoshim yom, soser. If he can find his proof within 30 days, then he can contradict it. Liachar shoshim yom, after 30 days, eno soser, he cannot. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, but that's not fair. Ma yasazeh shelo matzah b'toch shoshim, matzah liachar shoshim. What's a person supposed to do if he couldn't find the witnesses within 30 days and he only found them after 30 days? Amar lo, another case, he says to him, Havei eidim, the Amar Ainli. The court says, do you have any witnesses? And he says, I have no witnesses. Amar Havei Raya, he says, bring a proof. The Amar Ainli Raya says, I have no proof. Uliachar Zman, after a certain amount of time, Hevi Raya, Umatza Eidim. He says, great, I found my proof and I found my witnesses. Harei Zewen Klum. We don't believe him at that point because that's very suspicious. Right? He had no witnesses, all of a sudden he finds witnesses. Well, that's weird. Okay? Amar Shimon Gamliel says, what is the person supposed to do if he didn't know he had witnesses and he finds that he's got witnesses? He didn't know that he has a proof, and then he finds some proof. So then that's not fair. Let's say somebody sees that he's losing. Looks like the court case is winding down, and he clearly sees the judges are siding with the other side. V'amar kirvu ploni uploni v'yeduni, and then all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, I got two surprise witnesses coming." Right? Right. Oh, shahotzi raya mitakas pundaso, or he pulls out of his pocket or behind his belt or whatever some kind of contract. He goes, "Look, I found my document that I was missing the whole time." Right? That we don't buy at all because that seems very suspicious. All of a sudden he finds new testimony. Amar Rabbi Bar Avuna, halacha Reb Shimon Gamliel. The halacha is like Reb Shimon Gamliel in the first case about the 30 days. The halacha is like him. Amar Rabbi Bar Avuna, ein halacha Rabbi Kedivrei Chachamim, and then Rabbi Bar Avuna says the halacha is not like Chachamim. Well, that's pshita. Kevin Damar halacha Reb Shimon Gamliel. Ein halacha Chachamim. If you're going to tell me the halacha is like Reb Shimon Gamliel, then I know the halacha is not like the Chachamim. No, would you have thought? This is saying just ideally the halacha is like Reb Shimon Gamliel, that we're going to take it, but aval diavid shapir dummy. But if you follow the chachamim, okay, that's also okay. Kamash malan diavad mahadrin lay, that if you follow the chachamim, then that is not acceptable at all. We must follow Reb Shimon Gamliel. Amar lo. Then the next case, Amar lo ve'edim. He says bring witnesses, and he says no, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you got to accept them anyway. Amar Bar Rav Huna. In this case, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halach k'divrei Chachamim. Here he says the halach is not like Shimon Gamliel. The halach is like the Chachamim here. Amar Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, and Rabbi Rav Huna says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein halach Shimon Gamliel. And he also said the opposite, that the halach is, well, not the opposite, but the parallel, that the halach is not like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So pshita, it's the same thing. No, once you tell me the halach is like the Chachamim, I know it's not like Rav Shimon Gamliel. So how come when this one is teaching me is tell me that this is unusual. It's unusual in this Mishnah. Rav Shimon Gamliel says something, and the halacha is not like him. So that in all other cases, all other Mishnayos, whenever you see Rav Shimon Gamliel's opinion, the halacha is always like Rav Shimon Gamliel. La'afuke mehad. Now that is in contrast to another opinion about how often we follow Rav Gamliel. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Da'amar Rabbi Bar Chana. Rabbi Bar Chana said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol makom sheshana Rav Shimon Gamliel b'mishnasenu. Anytime you see Rav Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah, halach kamos, the halacha is always like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Chutz. Except in three cases. This is Raya Achrona, right? Bringing the later testimony after the court case is done. So this is one of the three cases where we don't follow Shimon Gamliel. There was Kamid Rav Nachman. There was a child that they brought into court in front of Rav Nachman. Amarle Islach Sadi, they asked the kid, do you got any witnesses to prove your father's case? So Amarle Lo, he says, I don't have. Islach Raya, do you have any proof? So Amarle Lo, he says, I don't. Chayve Rav Nachman said, I'm sorry, but I've got a rule against you. So Hava Kabachi Ve'azil, the kid was crying. Right? He was all upset. Shamu Hanach Inshi. So some of the guys around, they heard about the story. Amrule, they came over to the kid. Anan Yadinam B'milid Avuch. We know your father's business. The kid doesn't know his father's business, but these guys come over. He goes, we heard about your case, and we know your father's business. So we want to come testify on your behalf. So I'm a Rav Nachman wanted to know, is it too late? Because they asked him, do you have witnesses? And you said no. He said, the halacha is not, you're not like Rishon Gamliel. They can't accept him now, right? He says, Rav Nachman says, not here. But in this circumstance, Afilu Rabbanan Modu, the Rabbanan would even agree. Because it makes sense. It's not suspicious. So the kid didn't know. So he legitimately didn't know. It's not the same thing, right? We say that we don't want to accept the case where we ask a person, do you have any witnesses? He says no, and then all of a sudden he comes back 2 days later and he's got 2 witnesses.
That's fishy. How is this not fishy?
Because the kid, it makes logical sense that he doesn't know what his father's business was, right?
It's not exactly, Shimon Gamliel is not exactly a double jeopardy because it's waiting for late testimony. Right?
Well, the court case got decided.
I know, but they're giving you a time limit. Like double jeopardy is.
No, the Mishnah says if they give you a time limit, right? The Mishnah says you can always accept new testimony. If they give you a time limit, then you have to follow the time limit. Rishon Gamliel says you do not have to follow the time limit.
Oh, Rishon Gamliel says you don't. Okay.
There was once a woman, Denafik Shtara Mituta Yada. She all of a sudden showed up to court. She's got a contract. Amrale. Yadana b'haishtara depriya hava. She says, it's not my contract, but I know I was a third party. They told me to hold onto this contract, and I happen to know it was already paid. I know it was paid. So, Heimena Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, we believe her. It's a good point. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman, based on what? Kiman, who are you holding like? Rebbe? You're holding like Rebbe? Da'amar osios niknos b'mesira? Are you holding like that old shita that we said, that a contract can be handed from one person to another, even if it doesn't have the person's, if you didn't write a new contract, just the fact that Reuven gives it to Shimon, it becomes Shimon's contract and he can collect on it. And therefore, the fact that she had it means she's the new owner of the contract. So when she comes into court and says, I know it's paid, she's modeh, she's exempt, she's basically admitting on her own that this contract, that she isn't going to collect on the contract. She has the right to collect on the contract. She says, I'm not going to collect on the contract. Therefore, the contract is considered paid based on that. But, Amarle, that would be Shani Hacha. This is different. Diboy Kalse. So he says, this would be different because, he says, I don't hold like Rebbe, but this is different because she could have just not shown up with a contract. She could have burned it up. She could have destroyed it. If she wanted to make the guy not pay, she didn't have to show up to court with a contract at all. She's showing up saying it's a peshas or peshita, right? And I was waiting for you to say it, right? I know already, right? Right? She's the guy. She's the woman who showed up with a contract. So therefore, that's the only reason we were going to collect it. And she tells us a story about it. We're going to believe her. Eka da'amri. There are those who say lo himna Rav Nachman, that Rav Nachman did not accept the contract. Amrle Rava, to which Rava said to Rav Nachman, Vaha iboi kal, say, how come you're not accepting it? She could have just torn it up and destroyed it. Why are you not giving her believability? Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. So Kevan is chazik bebeidina. The answer is because this contract was already certified by a court previously. There's no way she could have hit it. That's what's going on here. Iboi kalsei lo amrinon. So therefore, there's no way she could have hit it. Esvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asked Rav Nachman the following question: Simpon sheyesh olav edim yiskayim bechosmav. If I've got a receipt, right? This is a receipt, and there are witnesses signed on this receipt. So then the witnesses, then the signatures can prove that that document is valid. Ein edim olav. If there are no witnesses on it, and it comes out from a third party, kosher. So, or right, this document is written after the signature of the witnesses on the contract. So then, it's kosher, right? The simpon is valid, and there's no concern that it's going to be a forgery. Okay, so on the one hand, we said that if you've got a simpon that has witnesses on it, so then you have to certify that, right? Yeah, either that's the iskayim bechosmav, you need to certify that. If, however, it comes from a third party, no certification is necessary. So what's going on here? You told us that you didn't believe this woman. Now she's a third party. We should give her believability. Alma shlish mihimon seems to imply that the third party has extra believability. Tiyufta to Rav Nachman, Tiyufta, that would have refuted Rav Nachman. Kiyas Rav Dimi Rav Yochanan. Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael. He said to Rav Yochanan, Liola mevi raya besoser ad sheyistatem ta'anosav. He says a person can always bring more proofs and contradict the court case until he says, I rest my case. That's all I have. V'yomar kirvu ploni uploni v'heiduni. Right? Then he says after the fact, at first he says my case is closed, then he comes back afterwards, he says so-and-so and so-and-so are going to testify for me. That we don't accept because that looks suspicious. Haguf akasha, 1 second, that makes no sense. First you said, Amart yistatem tanosov asan l'rabanan. First you said he closes his case, so then that follows the rabbanan. V'hadar amart kirvu ish ploni uploni ve'eduni asan Rishim Gamliel. Then you said so-and-so should come and testify, and now that sounds like you're accepting those witnesses. That sounds like Rishim Gamliel. V'chitema kula Rishim Gamliel. Maybe the whole thing is Rishim Gamliel. Feirush come first. He's explaining. Mayad shdias time tanosov. What does it mean until he completes his testimony? Ad shiomar kirvu ploni ploni v'ha'iduni. That means that until he says so and so and so and so can come and testify for me. V'ha'amar Rabbi Baruchana, but Rabbi Baruchana says no. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Kol makom sheshana Rabbi Shimon Gamliel b'mishnah seinu halacha kamoso chutz me'er v'tzidan v'rayach rona. The halacha is always going to follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And if the way that you're interpreting it is this way, so then you're going to interpret Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in a circumstance, a situation that the halach is not like him. So that is not okay. Ella ki also Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Rabbi Yochanan. So rather Rav Shmuel Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Liolam Mevi Raya. He can bring a proof, v'soser, and then he can contradict it, ad shiyistatim tanosov, until he rests his case. V'yom rulo, and he says, avei edim, v'omer ein li edim. He says, bring witnesses, and he says, I have no more. Havei raya, bring proof, v'omer ein li raya, and he says, I have no more. Aval bo edim minasiyam. However, circumstances are different if, let's say, witnesses showed up from overseas. So then, Oshahaya disko shel aviv mufkeres biaracher, or they find a bunch of contracts someplace else. So then you can bring a proof and contradict the previous thing that he said. Because why? Because this is like the case of the little boy, right? He didn't know about it. So you asked him, does he have any more stuff? And he said, no, I don't.
Wasn't that little boy Rabbi Nachman's son?
That was not Rabbi Nachman's son because he couldn't be a judge on his own son, right? Okay. He also Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rav Dimi came from Israel, he said the name Rabbi Yochanan. Hatokef es chavero badin. So if a person's going to bring his friend to court, echad, not his friend, yeah, but his friend to court. Echad Omer nidon kan, ve'echad Omer nelech l'makom havad. One guy says, let's go to the local Beis Din. The other guy says, oh no. Right, I'm suspicious that you're going to pull shtick in the city. Let's go to the big city. Let's go to where all the rabbis are, and let's go to that because you're not going to pull shtick with the big rabbis. Okay, so that's what it is. Kofino so v'yelech l'makom avad. You can force him to go to the main Beis Din. Amar lefanav Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says to him, "Wait, Rabbi, 1 second. Mi shenoshe b'chaver mon." Now think about it. The guy owes me money. And I want to get him, I'm saying to him, let's go, I want to get my money back. And he says, Yotzi mana almona, so now I got to pay travel expenses in order to get my contract back? I loaned you $100. Now I got to pay $100 in order to get my $100 back? That's not fair. Ella, kofinosovadan be'ira. Rather, we force him and you can make him judge in the local Beis Din. You always go local. Itmar nami, it was said also, Amar of Safar says, Shnaim shenis atzmu bedin. Right? 2 of them are fighting about the halach erech omar nidon kan ve'echad omar nelech l'makam avad. One says, let's judge the case here. One says, we're going over to where the main base medrash is. So, or the big city. Kofinosovadan be'ira, you force him to judge the case in that city. The im hutzrach davar lish'ol kosvin v'shulchan. And if that Beis Din gets stuck and they don't know what the halach is, they can always write a letter to the big Beis Din and ask a shaila. Now, ve'im amar kisvu utnili me'ezatam dantuni. If the guy got forced to come to this court case, and he says, I don't understand the reason why you did this. I'd like you to tell me the rationale behind what you decided, so that he can then, I guess, appeal that to a court later on. So then Kosvin V'Nosen, the Beis Din is responsible for writing that document to him. When you have a Yibam case, the woman travels to the man in order to, that's the order of priority. The woman travels to the man in order to do it in his Beis Din. Ad Kama, how far? I'm Rabbi Ami, Afilu Tzveri Litzipori, even Tzveri Litzipori. Now those are 2 cities not that far away. But if you have to travel by horse, it's still far, or camel. Amar of Kahana, Mikra, where does the pasuk say that is true? V'karulo zikne iro, that we're going to call the elders of his city, v'lo zikne iro, not the elders of her city. Amar Amemar says, Hilchasa kofino sovayelech l'makom avad, the halacha is, we force them and we go to the big Beis Din. Ravashi says to Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, "Kofinoso v'dan be'iro." We said the opposite. The Rabbi Elazar says that you force him and go to the local Beis Din. He says you're right. That's when the borrower is telling the lender, I want to go to the big city, and then the borrowers then the lender can say, no, I want the local based in. Aval milva, but if it's the lender and he says, no, I want to go to the big city, Eved lova lishmal, Eved lova lishmal, the halacha is that the borrower is considered a slave to the lender. He must do whatever the lender says. Shachle lemar ukva ziv l'dziv le kibar bisya. So he says, Rabbi Yirmiyah, sorry, where did I go? I skipped a line. So they sent a letter to Mar Ukva, to Ziv, right? He says to the shiny one, right? The one who shines like the son of Bisya, who is Moshe. Sholem Ukvan Bavloi Kabel Kadmana. We saw this fellow Ukvan, the Babylonian. He came before us. Yirmiyah Achi Hever Elias Haderech. The Amrulo Hisiuhu V'yira Panenu B'Tveria. He says, do us a favor. He says that you should bring him over to you and bring. Well, I guess it's a contradiction, right? He says he's Hevir Elias Haderech, right? He says that so and so this person did something bad to me. Right, he either physically assaulted me or some kind of like that, and they told him, they said you should take him, and then he should see us in Tveria. So hagufa kasha, that becomes contradiction. Because Amart, what did they tell this fellow to do, right? They said this fellow came before us and he wanted to judge the case, and they told him first, they told Marukva the question, they told Marukva, you judge it, and then they send him to us in Tveria. So which is it? Amru lo, alaima dainuha asun, hasiu, so gufa kasha. Amart, amru lo, Alama dainuha atun hasiu v'yir b'panina b'Tiveria. So how am I reading that? He says the Amru lo, they said to him, meaning dainua atun. He was telling Mar Ukva, you should judge him in Bavel. Dainua atun, right? Amru lo, they said you should judge him. Then they said hasiu v'yira paninu b'Tveria. Then they said send him up to Tveria, which is alma shadruhacha, which means to send him here. So which is it? That's a contradiction. Is he supposed to judge him there in Bavel, or was he supposed to send him to Tveria? So the answer is Ella Hachi Kamri. This is what they were saying. Amrulei, Dainu Atun, you should judge him. Eat Tsayas. If he listens to you and follows your halacha, and that you can decide the halacha, so then great. V'ilo, and if the guy doesn't listen to you, he becomes difficult, says you v'yur panina b'Tveria, then send him to us in Tveria. Okay? Rabbi Ashi Amar Rav Ashi says no. What happens was dini knasos hava. It was a halacha of knas. It was an assault case or whatever it was, and there's a knas that needed to be paid. Ube Bavel lo dainu dini knasos. Bavel, they didn't do dini knasos, right? They weren't allowed to because they didn't have anybody with smicha, so they had to send him to Tveria. V'alshachu lei hachi. So then, why did they tell him you judge him? Because kidei lachlo kavod lemar ukva. They were just sending it in a nice way, honorable way to tell Mar Ukva, you judge him. Oh, you can't? Send him to us. But they were giving him kavod first. You can take it first. Hadron alach zaborer, hadron alach zaborer, hadron alach zaborer. We begin the new parak lamed base tomorrow.